What happens when hype meets reality? Just weeks after their grand debuts at Watches and Wonders, the latest releases from Rolex, Patek, Tudor, Heuer and IWC are already flooding onto the grey market. When a $6,000 Rolex is suddenly listed for $15,000 overnight, questions need to be asked. The early grey market paints a very different picture from the polished narratives of the brand marketing campaigns, where control releases and their retail price tags meet the raw forces of supply and demand. It's here that the real winners and losers emerge, exposing which watches carry weight with collectors and which were all show and no substance. Let's take a look then at some of the prices that these new releases are hitting the grey market. Well, I think there's no better place to start than with Rolex, of course. Let's be honest, that's what most of you are here for. So let's kick this off with the Oyster Perpetual collection then. We got a whole host of brand new interesting colorways to freshen up the Oyster Perpetual line, something which I did predict. And we can see, if we take a look across websites like Chrono24 and eBay, what really some of the first prices are that people are asking for these watches. Now bear in mind, these are asking prices, and certainly on Chrono24 they will sell for less than that, and the actual receipts, the revenue that a dealer would take or a private seller would take on Chrono24, even less. Let's take a look at the flat blue dial M for the Oyster Perpetual 36. This is a watch which carries a retail price of £5,400, and we can see we're already finding examples advertised on Chrono for £10,500, and that equates to $13,650, and that means that the grey market premium is 94% more than the retail price. And the situation is very much the same as well for the Oyster Perpetual 36 with lavender dial. Again, that carries the same retail price tag of £5,400, but we can see these on the grey market at £12,000 hefty price tag, which is a $15,600 equivalent. That's 122.2% premium above its list price. The Oyster Perpetual 36 with pistachio dial, again, has the same price tag at retail of £5,400, but is being advertised for even more on the grey market than the other two, £13,762, which is over $17,500 equivalent. I can't really think of many watches ever having carried that kind of a price tag, other than when the Oyster Perpetual 41s were released originally 4 or 5 years ago. It's interesting to see that even after all of that market highs and market lows, that we're still getting pretty much the same premiums for an interest in the Oyster Perpetual new colorways as we got when they were originally released. Demand and interest in this collection remains very strong indeed, and that's reflected also in the 41mm case sizes. If we take a look at the 41mm with beige dial, this carries a retail price of £5,650, and those have hit the grey market for a whopping £15,995, which is $20,794, and therefore equates to a premium of 181.1%. Wow, the situation is even worse for the Oyster Perpetual 41 with pistachio dial, which I think really is the Tiffany of this year. The pistachio is very much in vogue, particularly if you're interested in chocolate. I don't know what's going on with Dubai chocolate at the moment, but we're seeing even pistachio flavoured chocolate bars going at ridiculous premiums in your supermarket. So maybe that's a trend that Rolex have tapped into here with their watch dials, and that certainly is reflected in their grey market premiums, because the Oyster Perpetual 41 pistachio has hit the grey market at a whopping £19,957. That's an equivalent of $25,944, which is an enormous 253% premium. Please guys, do not, unless money is no object to you, go out to the grey market and pay one of these charlatan dealers that kind of money for that watch. Intrinsically, at the end of the day, it is a sub $6,000 timepiece. And let's bear in mind, this is the first entrance to the grey market of those releases. Some fools for whom money is no object will pay that money because they don't care and they want to be like Mark Wahlberg, who's seen on Instagram wearing it first. And I get that, you know, if you can afford it, go for it, enjoy yourself. To others, look, you must be advised this price is only going to go one way from now on, and that is fall. Let's move on to the Daytonas, and we saw the return of the Daytona John Mayer with green dial and solid yellow gold. This is, in my opinion, not quite as nice as the original. The original had red accents on the dial as well. It looks a little bit more dated to me, so I think in the long term the grey market will probably price this watch at worse than the original John Mayer dial, which has fallen all the way down to I think around £55,000 the last time I checked on the grey market. This one carries a retail of $41,200, and the first entrants are hitting the market while they're trying. The dealers to ask £96,000 for this, which is a dollar equivalent of $124,800. Guys, a 133% premium above the retail is absolutely ridiculous. If you want this watch, there are many of them indeed that you can negotiate on with dealers and probably pick up for even less than £50,000 if you just go for that slightly older dial, which is better looking anyway. How about probably the biggest shock release of this year, the return of that Tiffany colorway. The Daytona Tiffany with Oyster Flex bracelet carries a retail price of $31,750. However, that doesn't stop the grey market from pricing it even more than that John Mayer watch. The first entrance to the market we've seen for these are around £118,000. I was quite surprised actually to discover that this wasn't an off-catalogue watch. I thought it would be. This will actually be regular production, but how regular, I don't know. I think the supply of this one will be quite limited, so I wouldn't expect to see much turbulence or depreciation of that enormous grey market price there. Finally, for Rolex, the GMT Lefty has remained in the collection. Many believed it would be discontinued, but no, Rolex have doubled down on it. This is really quite a nice watch, much better in person than I expected it to be, but again, it's just a bit of an oddity with that left-handed crown. At retail, this carries a price tag of £40,900, and the first entrance to the grey market we're seeing hovering around £60,000. So the first percentage premiums that we're seeing for this watch equate to 47.7% above the retail price. The standard version of this has fallen quite rapidly on the grey market. I guess because of that left-handed crown it isn't for everybody, so I would expect, I mean, even the initial entry point of 60 grand on the grey market isn't that massive in terms of percentage anyway above the retail, so I think this will fall even further. If you want that watch, wait for it and go and get it at retail. I'm sure that very soon it will become available, particularly given that it is solid white gold, and gold is very cold at the moment in terms of watches because they sit at enormous retail price tags anyway. That, guys, concludes part 1 of this video. Please join me in a few days when I will be releasing part 2. It came as a surprise to me that at Watches and Wonders just months later, it seems Patek responded to that, asking prices of astronomical figures. Bland, boring, uninspiring releases. Give this a couple of months and as with all Tudors, you'll be able to pick this up below the retail. I look at this and I think, well, you know, if you want it, buy it at $1,650. The consumers have spoken, the grey market has spoken. Yes, this is probably too much at retail there.